Could Texas running back Roschon Johnson be a day 3 steal? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. Check her out on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's Monday. We are headed into a new week. And with a new week comes new prospects to talk about. We're chugging along through our rookie prospect evaluations, and I'm excited for the one we've got today. Running back Roschon Johnson out of Texas, which is my newly dubbed favorite team as of this season. So I appropriately am wearing my my Texas Longhorn sweatshirt.
I like it.
And I'm all ready. I'm very prepared.
All right. So yeah, let's talk about Roschon Johnson because he's in a backfield with, a potential top 20 pick in Bijan Robinson. However, there's a lot to like here, Kate. First of all, what did you see when you turned on the film?
Yeah, first and foremost, let's talk about why this guy didn't get many snaps. Never exceeded 123 rush attempts at any point in his tenure at Texas. Why? Because you have the most generational running back prospect we've seen in some time running ahead of him. So can't knock him too much for his lack of experience, but Roschon Johnson, true power back, absolutely love everything about his game. That's what you see when you watch Roschon Johnson. It's the question of what could we have seen had he had more time to play.
Yes, I like him a lot. You mentioned the power. That's the thing that stands out the most about him. I was watching him this morning in a game where it was a 4th and 1. They give him the ball and he gets hit 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage and he's still able to convert just because he's so big and so strong. We should mention he was a former quarterback that had to move to the running back position as a freshman because of some injuries and out of desperation. Played really well. His most productive season was his freshman season. And then Bijan comes in the following year and he's behind Bijan. Now, Texas did a good job of trying to rotate in and trying to find a role for him, but you're just not going to get the stats when you have somebody like Bijan ahead of him. But Kate, we have seen over the last several years, just because you don't start and you don't get a lot of stats doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be a really good player in the NFL. Just I'll cite some off the top, right? Tony Pollard. Dameon Pierce, perfect example, sat behind Malik Davis, ended up being a 4th-round pick. Tony Pollard sat behind Darrell Henderson. Actually, they forced him to play slot receiver, was a Pro Bowl running back this year, one of the most explosive running backs in the league. The NFL leading rusher last year, Josh Jacobs, did not start in college. He played behind Damian Harris. He had less than 250 career touches at Alabama, still went in the first round. So don't knock him just because he doesn't have elite production.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus, you mentioned the size. He is one of the more prototypical sized big, power running backs, 6 foot, 219 pounds. When he had this opportunity, of course, when you have fewer touches, it definitely leaves room for more efficiency, but average 5.6 yards per rush attempt over his career at Texas. Had a pretty safe floor in terms of his touchdown production, despite those limited opportunities. Never had fewer than 5 rushing touchdowns. Even had some work as a receiver. Not a ton, but again, when you look at the relative volume of his overall playing time, you like to see the fact that he's had some opportunities to catch the ball. Now, as a prospect, when you watch him run, just he's powerful. He has that contact balance that we all know. I just absolutely love. I mean, there were times this season watching the games where if you uh, like by a clip of the eye, if you didn't catch the back of the jersey or
Hmm.
the front of the jersey, like if there was some weird angle, there were times where I thought Johnson was Bijan.
Yes.
Like just off the very quick glimpse, and then you're like, oh, Bijan's on the sideline. That's Johnson. Like he's got so much to like about his game, and like even from a player perspective, hear good things about like character, leadership in the
Yes.
locker room. Like he feels like one of these guys that there is an NFL team that could just absolutely fall in love with him. He's got fresh legs, didn't even
Yes.
exceed 400 total rushing attempts in his 4-year career. Now, let's talk about the combine because was kind of an interesting and weird combine for him. And I feel like you don't really get a very clear picture of Roschon Johnson based on what we saw at the combine.
Yeah.
4.58 40-yard dash, but he's a big dude, right? But that 10-yard split was incredible. 1.52, 83rd percentile for running back position. Um, not doesn't have the hops, a 31.5-inch vertical, not outstanding. Um,
It's
but then
okay.
excelled in the broad jump. Like I feel like his combine was just a little bit all over the map.
It was, to be honest, he reminds the combine reminded me a lot of Ramondre Stevenson just a few years ago, where, hey, this is a big power back that runs in the 4.6s. Now, Roschon was faster, it had better jumps, but you just know like his running style of being just a physical inside banger is going to translate. Okay. And I've got a couple stats here, courtesy of PFF. Like, this is what's incredible about him. Missed tackles forced per attempt, number one in the country among 515 running backs. Zone stuff, which that's a lot of what Texas did. Number one in the country. Yards after contact per attempt, 92nd percentile. So, like, you look at the advanced numbers, and like everything says this should be like a first round pick. Now, he doesn't have the athleticism, and that's why he's not going to be a top 50 or so pick, but day 3, like, if this guy is available, this feels like a no-brainer to me.
It feels like a no-brainer for pretty much any team whatsoever. But I mean, from like a dynasty perspective, Marcus, like regardless of where this guy falls, I think you have to see him as, a guy who again, previously played quarterback. So I do think there are, times where like, from a decision making standpoint, you might see him just stutter for a minute, but then you remember like, okay, his first game is quarterback, and he hasn't gotten a ton of reps
Yes.
at the running back position. Like I think there's still some room to grow even at the next
He's so
level,
new
even
to the
as
position.
yeah, like even as a 4th-year player at the
Yes.
position, like there's still so like it's not like he got all of these reps. Like he got maybe a season and a half's worth of
Yes.
reps. There's still so much that I still think he can learn. And even like in terms of his ability as a pass blocker, like pretty solid in his role as a pass
Yes.
blocker. Gave up only 8 total pressures over his 4 years at Texas, 160 pass blocking opportunities in his 4 years at Texas. And he was solid. Like
Still feels like there's
he
some meat on
wasn't a
the bone there.
liability.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. Not at all. Okay, let's talk about some potential landing spots, because I do feel like that's going to be a big thing for him because of what his strengths and weaknesses are. Let's talk about that next. This episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM app. You've heard us talk about this mobile game before, and if you've ever thought you'd make a good GM, obviously you do because you're listening to the Locked On Dynasty podcast. You're your GM of your own team. You've got to give this game a try. It's not quite as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build an historic dynasty. With Ultimate Football GM, you're going to be responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing all the finances, including negotiating players' salaries and the terms. Plus, you're going to have to do free agency, the draft, injuries, player personnel issues that are going to pop up throughout the season, and everything else that happens during the course of the year. All of this in a challenging but realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want to, when you want to. Locked On Dynasty listeners get a 100% free boost of their franchise when using the promo code Locked On, all in caps, in the game store. That is Locked On, all in caps. So make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That is ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Kate, let's talk about some landing spots for Roschon Johnson. It seems pretty unlikely that he's going to go in the first 2 rounds, but I think once you get into the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, I feel like that's where he's going to come off the board. Where would you like to see him land?
Man, Marcus, like the world feels like it's his oyster at this point. I've talked about this potential fit for a couple other landing spots, but what about the Los Angeles Chargers, who, again, we have this question of Austin Eckler and his requested trade. We don't know if that'll actually come to fruition, but even if Austin Eckler is in this offense, like he's getting older, I think it would benefit to have a power back brought into the system that can complement, Austin Eckler's usage as a receiver. And I think just take some pressure off of Justin Herbert in the passing game. And I feel like I'd just love to see this fit, especially as we gotta see what's up with the receiving assets and like Keenan Allen's getting older. And like, I would love to just see that stability in the run game continue. And I think Johnson could be a great asset to do that.
It seems like all the regular destinations that we talk about all the time, right? Like Dallas makes sense if you want to pair him with Tony Pollard. You mentioned the Chargers. I could even see him landing, I don't know, with Kansas City, right? Like all those teams. But it doesn't just feel like some team that we don't want him to land on is going to draft him. Like, hey, this seems like a type of Kyle Shanahan guy, right? Like that late day 3 or late day 2 running back that Kyle Shanahan drafts every year that we end up all overhyping. That's my fears. He just goes into one of these situations where there's already a really crowded backfield and he's working as the 3rd or 4th guy. That's what I'm worried about.
I absolutely share that fear, especially for the fact that like he is going, I think he projects in such a wide range.
Yes.
Could literally be to any team in the entire NFL. And the thing about like good NFL franchises is they appreciate depth, right?
Mhm.
And when you appreciate depth, you might be willing to reach on a, not to say reach, but you might be willing to invest in a guy like Roschon Johnson earlier because you know that like, okay, so as far as a backup running back is concerned, like, are there any guys that maybe could project as backups with as high upside as Johnson? Probably not. I'd be smart for really any of these teams, but the question is for fantasy, where would you like to see him? And what would be the worst landing spot?
Probably like Tampa. Like, I mean, I think ideally we'd get our hopes up because it's like, hey, this backfield could be open, but behind that offensive line without a quarterback there, I could see him kind of just getting lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
But to me, it's Dallas for a million different reasons, right? Like, stay in Texas. The Cowboys love to run the ball inside the 5-yard line. That's why Ezekiel Elliott always had double-digit touchdowns every year. I can see Roschon Johnson replicating that role and more in Dallas. And we know that they are a little bit hesitant about giving Tony Pollard 20 touches a game. So I think Roschon Johnson could walk into 12, 13 touches on one of the most powerful offenses in the league as soon as next year.
Yeah, I think that would be a very interesting fit. And this is a team that's been upfront, about their curiosity, even in the first round, to possibly be one of these drafters of Bijan Robinson. So if you miss out on Bijan in the first round and you decide to address some other areas of depth in your offense through the draft, what a better consolation prize in like the third or fourth round
Well,
than Roschon Johnson.
what if it's not a consolation prize? What if I would just rather have Roschon Johnson in the third or fourth round
Wow.
than Bijan in the first? Like
Is
I don't.
it? I mean, obviously, you're just saying based on cost, correct?
Yes, I'm not as big of a Bijan fan as everybody else is, and I'll give you an exact reason. There was a couple games where Roschon Johnson struggled this year. The Alabama game and the TCU game did not play well. Neither did Bijan Robinson. But then you watch Bijan tear up like UTSA, and then you watch Roschon do the exact same thing. Like they were kind of when one had a good game, the other one had a good game, and that's a lot just based on the situation. So if I can draft Roschon Johnson 100 picks later, I am absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, and again, you get a running back with fewer touches, fewer career touches on his body. Like, um, yeah,
I'm in. I'm in.
I'm in 100%. And I like from a fantasy standpoint, Marcus. Like, again, this is going to be a guy that I feel like I'm going to try to draft on every single one of my teams because in the right situation, I do think he has like I don't want to say RB1 upside, but like
Well, I'll give
could
you
be
an example.
RB1 upside.
I think like a very good comp to what he could be in the NFL as like a fantasy producer is like Brian Robinson, right? Brian Robinson didn't get a
I
ton
see
of
him as
touch.
a better
Yeah,
Brian Robinson though.
right. And Brian Robinson got a ton of touches with Washington. Now he didn't get a lot of the goal line touches, which kind of nuked his value a little bit. But why couldn't he be a Brian Robinson or a Jordan Howard or a type of running back like that where, hey, maybe it's a struggle to get to 1,000 yards, but it's double-digit touchdowns and 25 to 30 catches every year.
Yeah, absolutely. I very much like him. And I do think depending on the landing spot, again, every single one, like it's so hard to project these running backs into these various offenses because like anything could happen and there just aren't enough starting roles in the NFL right now. Like all of these running backs and their value for fantasy is
Yep.
going to be so dependent on where they land and what these opportunities actually are for them to get touches. But if they get touches,
Yes. All right, let's talk about Roschon Johnson's current dynasty value next. All right, Kate, we are back talking about some dynasty value here for Roschon Johnson. Uh, let me ask you this off the top. Where do you have him valued among rookie running backs?
Oh, Marcus, I like the more work I do on him, like I want to keep pushing him up my draft board. And I need somebody to talk me out of that. Because right now he falls right around like RB7, RB8, and it feels like the upside could be so much more.
Which he's getting drafted below that, by the way, being drafted as RB9 right now on Dynasty League football.
And I don't know. Talk me out of it. Talk me out of it because he's again. I'm the first to admit he's very much like the type of running back I like to watch. He's a big like I love power backs. He's got the size. He's got a limited total. He's got I think a lot of all of his advanced metrics would tell you that if he gets more work, he's going to be very successful. So like he feels like this diamond in the rough. I was very in on I mentioned Dameon Pierce last year, who at Florida, like nobody really knows why he didn't take over as that team's RB1 because he was incredibly successful.
Yep.
And all of the advanced metrics would have told you this guy deserves more touches and he just didn't get them. At least now we have a reason. Like we know why he didn't get more touches, and it's because of Bijan Robinson. Like so when I look at how high I had Dameon Pierce, just based on that fact that like everything you saw, you loved, all of the advanced metrics you loved. It was just these lack of touches. Like the same thing applies to Roschon Johnson, but it's less of a question mark. So why don't like why isn't he higher on my draft board? It's probably just because of the projected draft capital. But
and that can change, right?
yeah,
Like if somebody drafts him in the 3rd round or the top of the 4th round, you're not going to care, right? I'm not afraid of drafting Roschon Johnson higher than ADP for a couple of reasons. One, we've seen this history of draft running backs from big schools where there's just a lot of talent, like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. Like all these teams have a ridiculous amount of talent. So a lot of times drafting RB2 is better than drafting the number 1 running back at a smaller school. It's happened over and over again. And it's happened in that conference. And we mentioned Ramondre Stevenson didn't get a bunch of touches, didn't perform well at the combine, but now he's one of the most top 10 dynasty running back right now. I think the last time I saw he was 8. Went also, I think 4th or 5th round. I'm betting Roschon Johnson has a similar career trajectory. Yeah. So I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, I have a feeling that he's just going to continue to climb it because even a lot of the guys that are ranked like just ahead of him, like your Sean Tuckers, your Zach Evans, like your Tajay Spears, like those are all like smaller guys who I think are really talented, but do they have quite as much upside as Roschon Johnson might have at that size with his particular skill set as a power back? Johnson probably has more upside there.
Mm-hmm. We're in, Kate. We're in. We are in on Roschon
You know what?
Johnson.
Every time we have a show, Marcus, I just fall in love with a new guy, and that just tells me it's time for the NFL draft. I'm itching for this NFL draft and to figure out where these guys are going because I do think, this class feels especially dependent on landing spot, maybe more so than any other class in recent memory.
Should also mention really quickly before we go, right now in standard dynasty leagues in rookie ADP, Roschon Johnson being picked as player 21, 22. So that's at the back end of your 2nd round. And again, I think that's with the expectation that he goes 4th, 5th round. If he suddenly gets day 2 draft capital, you're going to see him being selected much, much higher than that. So now is a good time to buy Roschon Johnson. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Now make your second listen the Locked On NFL Scouting Show with the Draft Dudes, where I'm sure they'll be talking about Roschon Johnson from free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Please go check us out on YouTube. We post shows every single day over there. And go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Matt and Ryan back on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Kate, you and I have a special guest on Friday. Looking forward to seeing you guys then.